So we're with Richard Saucedo, and probably everybody knows the successful program that you had at Carmel for 31 years. You're a musical arranger and composer for lots of programs around the country. I think you serve as the chief judge for Bands of America in the fall season. For those competitive programs around the country, can you speak a little bit to your experience about what goes into designing a marching band show these days, whether it's competitive or not, and maybe what some of the differences around that?
I think probably the first thing you have to take into mind when you're putting together your show is who your audience is going to be. I've always said, or at least I've said this ever since I've grown up a little bit, because I used to think that the audience was just judges, and that it was all about how competitive we could be. But now when I talk to directors, I'm like, if you can do great on Saturdays in front of judges, good for you. But you really want your program to thrive, kick butt on Friday night at your ball games and have your principal walking around saying, have you heard our band lately? Have the football parents walking out of the stadium going, man, that band is good. That's where you're going to thrive. That's where your program is going to get support. A lot of people don't understand the competitive thing, even administrators. So you're not just going to get support through doing well in a competition. You're going to get support through being a total school person or a total school teacher, thinking about the entire school environment. So I always encourage people to design for Friday nights because I think you can do both. I think you can design a very competitive show, but you can also design a show that's exciting on Friday nights for your crowd. So if you are we'll start on the competitive side of things. If you are going to do a competitive show, the first thing you have to do is decide what you're in it for. Are you in it to really help your kids grow? Is it important for you to win, or place high? What are your goals? And I always encourage directors to just make their goal that the kids, when they finish the season, can't wait to come back and start again next season. I still think that's the most important thing. What are we doing for our kids? But if you want to put together, let's face it, we all like to be competitive. We all want to do well when we go to contests. You have to put together a show that is going to display all kinds of different types of talents and abilities. And obviously on the marching field, we do that musically and we do it visually. So you have to figure out how those two aspects are going to work together to present an effect for judges, for audiences, that folks are going to go, wow, musically they're great. Wow, visually they're great. Look at the overall effect they're getting. It's not easy to do, and I think sometimes it's not easy to do because we overthink it a lot. And I think that if you just kind of stick to the main idea, which is let's make sure that our kids are getting better. Let's make sure that every rehearsal we're giving them great information. I think that's always going to be the most important thing. But you got to play well. You have to play well. Well, how do you play well? You have to do basics. You have to be willing to do basics. I'll give some props to one of my colleagues, Chip Krotz at Blue Devils, who's the brass caption head. He is amazing at getting kids to understand why those basics are so important. And we do basics for an hour and a half with Blue Devils, and those kids wouldn't flinch because they were so convinced that that Chip knew what he was doing, and they knew he was going to make them better. And so he was a great leader. All directors have to be a great leader, and we have to be a little bit of a salesman when it comes to teaching basics. The same thing with visual. And our great friend Jeff Young would tell you that, who's one of our visual gurus here in the country, now works for Bands of America. But he would say the same thing. He'd say most groups don't spend enough time on fundamentals. They're too worried about getting the show out there. Same thing with color guard. There are just not enough basics, and so kids struggle when they don't understand the basics. But if you really want to have a competitive group, and it doesn't matter if you only have 20 in your group or you have 250 in your group has to be fundamentally sound, musically, visually, and movement-wise, which includes the color guard.
For those directors who are aspiring to get to that next level at a competitive level, and you hear the term design team thrown around a lot in some of these bigger programs. What does the design team look like? Who are the players? If your program can afford to have that, what does that look like?
Yeah, first of all, the whole design team came from some directors that were willing to leave their ego at the door and realize that they didn't know everything about programming a show. So they would hire great arrangers, they would hire great designers visually, they would hire great color guard folks. And that's kind of where the whole design process started. And a lot of it started in Drum and Bugle Corps, but now it happens all around the country. But I still see, Scott, everywhere I go, both sides. I see programs that have anywhere from 3 to 10 designers on their staff that are putting together the show. But I also see directors who are a one-stop shop. They're doing it all on their own. And so either way that you're doing it, you have to have a plan. You got to know what the goals are. If you can get those kind of people on your team, more power to you, because it's just going to help your kids get better. It's going to give them a better vehicle to compete with. And even for groups that want to be great on Friday nights, I couldn't put together a visual program that would excite our audience on a Friday night, but I know a bunch of people who could, so I'll try to hire those folks. And if you can't, if you're doing it yourself, then somehow you got to get in the car or get on the plane or whatever, and you got to get to those people and pay them to talk to you a little bit about how you can learn to do it. And people are willing to help out there. I find that the more some of our best designers around the country are the ones who are the most willing to help young directors to learn how to do these things.
For those programs that are in that competitive realm, or even not, when does the process of figuring out that design process, what does the timing of that look like?
It has to start early, just because if you're putting together anywhere from an 8 to 10 minute show, that's a lot of time. That's a lot of design stuff. It's a lot of music. So you have to give yourself enough time. Most programs, the programs that I work with, most of them start in January. So right after the Midwest Convention, and sometimes we have meetings at the Midwest Convention in Chicago where people want to start talking about their design because they know that all of us who are designers are busy. They also know they're busy. They're trying to get their concert bands going, their jazz bands going. But sooner than we realize, it's going to be April or May, and we're going to say, oh, we're not ready for a marching band. So I think a lot of people are starting earlier. And that's what I would suggest, whether you're doing it yourself or whether you have a design team, that early in the year you get started so you're never in a panic. You always have time to think through things and come up with the best design for your kids.
Let's talk about selecting music specifically for the show. So, there's everything from a lot of published tunes. You've got a lot of published marching band tunes out there. There are now pre-packaged complete shows where there are composers such as yourself that are writing that people can buy their entire show. And then there's custom arrangements where they're hiring arrangers. Talk a little bit about what each of those processes look like in terms of selecting music.
Well, if you're going to buy a packaged show, most people, I think, do that because they feel like that those groups of tunes or whatever that show is made of is going to appeal to their kids. I think, and it's also a little less expensive way of getting your music together for your winds and percussion. So I'm all for that. The only thing that I would suggest is make sure that you really do your research. Make sure that you not only listen to the music, but look at the scores. Make sure it's realistic for your group. Not that you can't water some things or change some things when you get it, but you got to make sure it's going to appeal to your kids because that's the number one thing. And then if you're doing custom arrangements, make sure your designers know what you want. That's the number one thing. I do love it every once in a while. One of the reasons I love composing for the Cavaliers is because the folks up there, Scott Coder, who was our program coordinator, would just look at me and say, go. Here's the concept, go. So that was fun. But especially if I don't know the program that well, I want to know what the directors are thinking. I kind of want to know what they want. So make good notes for your designers, whether it's musical or visual. Make sure they know what you want. Make sure they know the level of your kids. Don't accept a grade 5 written show if your band is a grade 3. And we always joke about, let's teach the kids we actually have, not the kids we wish we had. And let's be realistic and let's give them a chance to be successful by getting the right kind of music. There are all kinds of ways that folks can get music, but the number one thing that I ask is that folks to think about is your kids. What's going to appeal to your kids? What's going to appeal to the kids at Carmel may not appeal to the kids in Houston, Texas. It just depends where you are and the environment that you're in. And I think the closer you can come to getting music that your kids are going to be excited about every day, the more chance you're going to have to be successful. Because if I'll write an arrangement and then I'll have the director come back to me and say, well, we love the chart. I took the first trumpet part down a little bit because it's too high. And of course, I want to say, why didn't you tell me that they couldn't play that high? And that's what I mean about giving information to the designers. So you have to make sure that you're writing for the kids that are actually going to play and giving them a chance to be successful. And I still think that's number one. When you're putting together your visual program, your music program, your color guard program, your kids have to have the opportunity to be completely successful. And if it's too hard and they struggle and they're disappointed and they're down because they can't do it, then don't expect those kids to be excited to do it again the following year. So it's about, my whole thing right now is about how can we set up our kids for success so they want to be a part of this and they want to come back year after year to do it.
Awesome. Well, for those programs that can afford to hire a you or somebody else to write, that's great. But I've been actually listening to a lot of published music, some of yours. I listened the other night to Reflections of Sound, Form, and Light, which actually I thought was a pretty cool show.
Thanks.
That is
Thank
off
you.
the shelf. And I don't know that teachers know that there are those things available to them as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because I wrote that show years ago. But I'll still get an email or two from directors in the fall say, hey, we're doing this show, and can you give us some suggestions, or would you talk to our kids about it, or whatever. So I'm thrilled that it's held up, and that bands still enjoy doing it. And I am hoping that in the future I'll get a chance to write some more shows like that for people.
Well, we're going to try to convince you to write one of those prepackaged shows for us.
Cool. Love to do it.
Talk a little bit about those people that are doing custom arrangements. The whole idea of licensing and permissions to use music is a hot topic. So what do directors need to know about, if we're going to go that direction, what do they need to be doing?
Yeah, before you assign a piece of music to an arranger, you have to make sure you have permission to play that music. So there are different organizations you can go through. We all know there's Tresona, who's kind of a clearinghouse for that. But you can also go directly through the copyright holders. If it's owned by Sony or one of the big companies and you want to deal with that, more power to you, but it's tough. But the opposite side of that is if you don't do it and somehow you get caught, it costs even a lot more than that. So I really encourage everyone to make the first stop with the copyright holder and say, can we have permission to do this? And you know what? If they say no, you just can't. We get upset about it or whatever, but you can't do it. If they say no, you just can't do it. So make sure you have the permission, because I know of some horror stories of some bands and some drum corps even that didn't do their due diligence and ended up losing thousands of dollars because of it. So make sure you get that taken care of.
You've touched on this, but as a teacher, how critical of having a good relationship with your students' parents and booster organizations is that in today's world?
I think it's one of the most important relationships we have. Obviously, the relationship with our kids is number one. Relationship with our administrators is really important. But if you want to have a close-knit program where everyone's going in the same direction, everyone's working towards the same goals, and everyone believes in the same things, you have to have the parents right there beside you, believing in the same things. And the time that people get in, and I ran into this too, when I was teaching, the time that directors get into problems with parents is when the parents aren't always clear on what the focus is, or what are the goals of the program. And if parents aren't clear on those things, then sometimes it can be rough because they feel like they're surprised all the time about things that are going on. So make sure that parents understand the mission of your program, what you want to achieve. Just little things like if you come to a program for the first time, you don't want to go to your parents in your very first meeting and say, hey, next year we want to try to go to Macy's, so we need thousands of dollars. I mean, you don't want to do that. You want to build some trust, you want to build some relationships, and then start to work towards the things you want to do. But boy, if you've got parents behind you, there's nothing you can't do, because there are no parents anywhere in the school building tougher than band parents. All right, so those are the people that you want beside you.
Similarly, you touched on this as well, but your administration and other colleagues, how important is a good relationship, even with the athletic coaches?
It's critical. I tell one of my favorite stories to tell is about the fact that I used to go down and watch our girls basketball team practice all the time, and I would take notes. And my good friend, Jen Marlowe, who's remained a good friend, she was, I think, one of the she was a captain or one of the leading players at Butler on the girls team, outstanding athlete. And I would watch, and she would ask me sometimes why I was watching, and I said, I'm just trying to learn. And then every once in a while she would come out and watch what we're doing. And we realized that we're working on the same things. And so slow but sure, we started to develop this relationship with the athletic folks. And we started realizing that even though it's music and athletics, we're using the same words. We're using the same kind of thoughts about basics and fundamentals. And so we started talking more and more. And I actually became good friends with a lot of the coaches and learned so much from them. And some of the most emotional moments at Carmel were before we were going off to Grand Nationals or something, to have a football coach just say, hey, can I come and talk to the kids? And wow, it was amazing. So those relationships are also important. Your principal has to know you other than the person who complains when they don't have enough money or because when something doesn't go wrong or something doesn't go right. So every once in a while, just go see your principal and say thanks, and thanks for supporting us. And so make sure that you're supportive of your administrators, because they go through way more than we will ever realize.
Well, this is all great information for teachers. Thank you so much for
My pleasure.
doing this with us.
Thank you.